Hi, and welcome to Mapping Your Ancestors. In this talk, I'll be showing you the different tools and map-based records you can use to find out more about your ancestors' lives and where they lived. Now, we'll jump straight in and look at our first tool. This is called surname mapping. Now, whenever you do a search on the genealogist, you'll notice that all the results are on the right-hand side, and the summary results are shown on the left. What I recommend you do is pick the first census, so 1841, before that mass migration around the country due to industrialisation, and search for your surname. No other fields are required at this point. In this case, I'm showing an example of looking for Babbage, the founder of computing. So when you do this search, as I said, on the left-hand side you get that summary. If we pick the 1841 census, you'll notice that there's a link to viewing a map of these results. And this link exists for all of our nationwide record sets, so census, births, marriages and deaths, tithe records, etc. When you view the map of results, it produces a heat map showing you the concentrations of the different results in different counties. As you can see for the surname Babbage, in 1841, the origin of that particular surname is in Devon. So it's really easy to see the origin of your particular surname, unless it's something like Smith, Jones or Williams, and the whole map will be red. Now, once you've discovered the origin of your surname in 1841, it's really nice to then see how that map changes over time. So you can load up a map for the 51 census, the 61 census, and so on and so on, up to 1901. So between 1841 and 1901, we have all of England, Wales and Scotland available on the mapping tool. Unfortunately, the 1911 census isn't out for Scotland, nor the 1939 register. So we can show you a map still just for England and Wales, showing you 1911 here, and later on the 1939 register. And what you'll see is a migration pattern forming quite often. In this case, you can see the Babbage family have started moving up through Devon into Somerset, Gloucester. So you can see quite often how surnames change over time. And as I've done on this latest picture, you can see modern day maps as well, using, in this case, I've used birth records between 1995 and 2005. So you can find records all the way up to 2005 with these surname maps. Now let's take a look at our first map collection with the Charles Booth poverty maps. Charles Booth was an industrialist and later a social reformer. And in 1886, he began research into the poverty of London, and he wanted to highlight the abject poverty of certain areas. He spent 15 years compiling this research and produced 17 volumes. And of this work he produced many different ordnance survey maps that he had annotated to show the poverty levels of every single street in London itself. I'll show you a quick example looking at Buckingham Palace. Now, he had a colour coding system indicating the yellow highlights were the highest classes, the most wealthy of the city. And it went through red, then blue to black, which Charles Booth listed as vicious semi-criminal. And as you can see here, Buckingham Palace was just a few streets away from Chadwick Street, the current home of Channel 4, which is a very nice place in London today, but according to Charles Booth, back in the 1880s, was in the lowest class of all, being the vicious semi-criminal. Now, all of our map collections are available in one unified interface, and this is called Map Explorer. I just want to show you how you can use Map Explorer to jump through time, and I'll be looking at a case study in a second to show you how this works. But basically, Map Explorer has a layer of modern day maps. Then on top of those modern day maps is historic ordnance survey maps. And then finally, the top layer of all is our record set layer, which shows you pins, as you can see in this screenshot here. And each pin relates to a record. And you can change the transparency of various layers so you can see from a historic map through to a satellite image or modern day map and see exactly where your ancestral's home is. And this interface allows us to travel through time and look at a specific place or a specific area. And that's what we're going to do in this case study. We're going to look at this case study in Chesington. So we can go right the way back to 1086 with the original Doomsday. So here we can see Chesington. And if we click the pin on Chessington in Map Explorer, it will bring up all the results from that Doomsday record. And in 1086, it listed 3 villages. Now, a villager was a landowner, typically owning about 30 acres. So you can see there was 3 landowners of owning 30 acres or more. There was 1 smallholder, and a smallholder was usually described as somebody who owned 5 acres or less. And there was enough land for there's 2 plough lands worth of area in Chessington. So a plough land was about 120 acres. So in total, Chessington equated to about 240 acres of ploughable land. Now let's jump forwards in time to 1836 with tithe records. Now, tithing was where you gave 1/10 of your produce to support the local clergy, and this has been going on for centuries. In the year 794, King Offa of Mercia made it a compulsory tithing, so everyone had to give their 1/10 of their produce. And like I say, it's been continuing for centuries up until 1836, and that's why you still see those huge tithe barns where they were storing all this produce to give to the local clergy. In 1836, the government decided to move to a monetary payment system because trying to organise everyone's produce to give to the clergy was quite time-consuming and a bit of a logistical challenge. So the government opted to go to this monetary payment system. So it was known as tithe rents or corn rents because the tithe rates were attached to the price of corn for every year. So they would go up as almost like an early way of recording inflation. So in 1836, the government decided to do a nationwide survey to make it a fair tithing, so everybody would pay the same sort of rate of tithes depending on their parcels of land and what it was used for. So they recorded every person's parcel of land, who owned it, who occupied it, what it was used for, whether it was pasture or arable, for example. And also they would draw these huge maps indicating the whole parish and detailing each individual parcel on that parish map. So let's have a quick look at Chessington again. Here you can see the original tithe apportionment records listing every single parcel of land, who owned that parcel of land and who was renting it at the time. And here you can see Henry Gosser Squire owned all these parcels of land on the page, and James Whitehead Perry Esquire was the occupier. But if we concentrate on just one parcel of land, we're going to have a look at plot 199. If I zoom in, it says Burnt Stubbs Farm, which is a house, buildings, lawn and yard, totaling 2 acres, 1 rod and 27 perches. The total of all those parcels of land came to 202 acres, and the tithe rents to pay was £43 and 19 shillings, which is about £2,500 today. So if we go to plot 199 on the map, you will see the whole map of Chessington, and you can zoom right into the individual property itself, and here you can see Burnt Stubbs Farm. Now, Burnt Stubbs Farm was originally a mansion built in 1348, and it became a Cavalier stronghold during the British Civil War in the mid-1600s, and Cromwell's forces attacked the building and burnt it down to the ground, hence the name Burnt Stubbs. So it was later rebuilt and named Burnt Stubbs. It became an inn at one point and then later on a farm. And we'll see how this property changes over time. So from 1836, we want to go forwards now in Map Explorer. We can jump to 1910 with the Lloyd George Doomsday. So Lloyd George, as the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, was tasked with raising funds for inland revenue. And to do that, he introduced, or planned to introduce, a new tax based on government spending in the local area. And the government were due to tax you on the increase in your property of value over time due to that government spending, maybe on improving the road system, for example. That meant that in 1910, a huge nationwide survey was performed, and they recorded all the various details about every single property, who was the owner, again, who was the occupying that property, and many different details about that property, the state it was in, the rooms, any outbuildings attached to it, etc. So that's great for us genealogists because it's a really good way of seeing what kind of home your ancestor lived in. Like I say, it covered the whole of the country. So this is a project that we've currently got with the National Archives in partnership with them, and we're conserving every single book and every single map that we digitise. So there's 3 parts to the Lloyd George Doomsday that you can search through. There's the IR91 index to the City of London and Westminster. There's the IR58 field books, which cover the whole of England and Wales. They're the detailed records. And then there's finally the maps, which come from IR121 all the way up to IR135, covering the various different areas of the country. Now we've got the complete index from IR91 live on the site. Our current coverage for the maps and fieldbooks include the whole of Greater London, Bedfordshire, Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, Northamptonshire and Oxfordshire. We'll soon be releasing more home counties, followed by the rest of the country. But let's jump back to our case study in Chessington and look for where Burnt Stubbs Farm was. Instead of Burnt Stubbs Farm, the location is now occupied by Chessington Lodge, owned by this person, the Right Honourable Arthur Fitzgerald Kinnaird. And you can see there's many details on this one page, but with every record in IR58, you have 4 pages of many different details, including the insurance rates, the sort of rentable value, any other description of the rooms, the state of that particular house, if there's any outbuildings, etc. And as you can see, there's a large amount of detail on there. Now, Arthur Fitzgerald Kinnaird was a really interesting person. He was the main board director for Barclays Bank up until his death, and he was also the first sort of football star. He popularised the game. In fact, there's a Netflix TV series all about him called The English Game, which I recommend watching. He also holds the world record for the number of FA Cup finals played in, which is 9. And he was also the president of the FA for 33 years. So a rather interesting fellow. Now we can jump from plot 10 on these records to the original map, and as you can see, it loads up Chessington again, right where the location of Burnt Stubbs Farm is. You can see the nice Chessington Lodge standing there in that photograph. Now, it's not just map-based records that are tied into Map Explorer. We've actually attached our census records back to 1871 so far to Map Explorer as well. And that means you can travel through time and see who was living in a particular property in each different census state. I'll just show you how that works. So in 1871, you can see here the pin indicating an F.F. Kelly. If we click to view the record, now Frederick Festus Kelly was actually the founder of Kelly's Directories, so quite a well-known person, especially in genealogy circles. And as you can see here, now I've loaded up the household, you can see with each census record we actually show the map underneath of where that particular household is located. Again, if you click that map on the screen, it'll load up the full Map Explorer so you can explore more. Now in 1881, Frederick Festus Kelly was still owning that property, but he was living in his London flat at the time, so the lodge was unoccupied. We can jump to 1891 and we find William Otto Dankwords, who was a noted lawyer at the time. And then jump forwards again 10 years, we can go to Frederick Bingley, who was also a barrister. So it's really nice to see how you can jump through time nice and quick and easy via Map Explorer and see who was living in a particular property at any given time. If we move forwards another 10 years, we can jump and see that the owner of the property in 1911 is listed as David Cameron. Not that David Cameron. This David Cameron was the director of the East India Trading Company. And finally, we can jump to 1939 and we discover that Reginald S. Goddard, also known as RS to his friends, was living in the property. And it lists his job here as zoo proprietor and founder, which might give you an indication as to what became of Chessington Lodge. Now, another feature of Map Explorer is this middle layer of historic maps. So when you've got your various different records displayed on screen as pins, you can change between the various different maps that you're seeing, so you can find a contemporary resource for you to compare your map to. So the various different historic ordnance survey maps we have are the 1890s with a 6-inch to the mile scale. This is where you can see Burnt Stubbs listed. We also have 1930s 1-inch to the mile map where you can see that Burnt Stubbs is also listed along with the description Surrey Zoological Gardens. We have a 1940s map range which has a 2.5-inch to the mile, and now you can see that Chessington branch line has opened. And then finally we have a 1950s and 60s map range that you can look through as well. So you can see how an area adapts over time, expands, covering the sort of surrounding rural areas. But you can also see a modern day version of the map. So we have ties in with OpenStreetMap, Ordnance Survey maps, and also Bing maps that can show you satellite imagery. And I'll just show you, you can see burnt stubs listed there on our historic maps. If we take the transparency down to the modern satellite imagery, you can see there how things look today, very different, all built up. As you can see here, Burnt Stubs is now the site of Chessington Wild Adventures. Now let's show you how the various different parts of the interface work. Firstly, here you can see the option to change your record set layer. Currently set to Tithe, but we can change that to the Lloyd George Doomsday. So you can see Burnt Stubs Farm changing into Chessington Lodge. You have the option to change through the different historical map layers as well. And here you can see, as I've mentioned before, Surrey Zoological Gardens. If we take the transparency right down, now you can see the option to change from your modern satellite imagery to OpenStreetMaps. And of course, all those pins that you can see on the screen are always available for you to click on. So if you click on a particular pin, again, you can see the original records that they relate to. You can search for a particular address. So if you want to jump to your particular property you're living in at the moment, you can type that right in, including just a postcode, and jump to that particular location. You also have the option to change from modern to historic, and you can search for an address from the 1900 directory they have on the database as well. If you wanted to just jump to a particular county, you can do that, and once you've jumped to a county, you can jump to a particular parish. And one of the more interesting tools that you can use is if you're out and about exploring a local field, or if you're on a walk or a historical site, you can click the Locate Me button, and Map Explorer will jump to exactly where you're standing and show you any historical maps and records that we may have for that area. And if you want to save this to your research, you can simply click that blue cog, and you can have the option to download an image or print it off in your printer at home. Now, Map Explorer has another useful feature. When you're in the advanced search for a particular record set, in this case Lloyd George Doomsday, you have the option to view the results directly on Map Explorer itself. So let's have a look at a quick example, looking for the family of the Duke of Westminster, the Grosvenor family, and what sort of property they owned at the time of the Lloyd George Doomsday. Now, they were granted swamplands in the 17th century that was not deemed to be worth that much, but I think you'll realise it's changed somewhat since then. So if we click to view a map of those results for the Westminster search, you can see the area it covers is Pimlico, Knightsbridge, Westminster, Mayfair, Belgravia. So all very wealthy areas of London nowadays. And you can zoom in to Grosvenor Square, obviously Grosvenor Square taking its name from the family that own it. You can see all those green pins indicating that the Duke of Westminster owned all of those properties. So I hope that shows you all the various map collections that are available for you to search online and how they're all easily accessible using Map Explorer. Well, thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.